LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 25th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. This week I picked out the 12 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. There's a link down in the video description to my clip list. You can read my notes that I use to remind myself what it was I wanted to say about the clips. There's also links down in the video description to the source of all the clips, including Saturday Night Live. If you're looking for the Saturday Night Live cold open, that will be the first comedy clip I'll show you in a moment. 9 days to defeat Trump. 9 days to defeat Trump. That's the topic. A main part of that is COVID. I'll be talking about the coronavirus spike. That is a big story. It's a big reason I'm thinking that it's likely Trump is going to lose. I'm going to show you some polling and electoral maps along the way and how we're going to watch Trump probably lose, but that's not a certainty. I'm hoping for a Trump landslide, and I'll talk about that a little more when I get to the Nate Silver clip at the very end, talking about what to watch for on election night. And I also have a couple clips talking about Joe Biden and fracking and climate change. If you watched my debate clip roundup I did on Friday, I said that was Biden's one mistake, and I'm going to talk about whether I was right about that or wrong about that, or how my opinion has changed on whether it's good for Biden to have a sort of amorphous position on fracking and phasing out the oil industry or transitioning away from oil. And that will be with the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez clip at the end. But like I said, I want to start with political comedy from Saturday Night Live, their cold open, parodying the debate that I covered. Oh, there's a link down in the video description to my 1 hour, 45-minute debate clip roundup, which included coverage of all the big five corporate outlet responses to the debate. But this will be Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump, Jim Carey as Joe Biden. And, I thought Jim Carey's Biden was better this week. He's still making fun of some of Biden's foibles, but he's not really playing into that dementia theme and the whole Fire Marshal Bill thing I didn't like. And I'll talk about that more and the foibles he satirized from Biden. And then, of course, Alec Baldwin still does Trump as, the caricature of our liar-in-chief. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch the political comedy clip. This is about 2 minutes, 45 seconds of 11 or 12 minutes of the cold open that I've edited together for reasons I'll explain after we watch it together over here.
Our first question on the coronavirus is for President Trump. More than 40,000 Americans are in the hospital tonight with COVID. How would you lead the country during the next stage of this crisis?
What a nice question. Thank you, Hoda. And can I just say you're really doing a great job?
Wow, it is creepier when you're nice, but thank you.
No, really, you're taking really good care of us tonight. Now, could you just tell us about the specials, please?
Oh, no. Mr. Trump, I'm the moderator, not your waitress.
Oh, okay, then just some waters then, okay? This is fine. Anyway, coronavirus, so boring, right? But we're doing terrific. We're rounding the corner. In fact, we've rounded so many corners. We've gone all the way around the block, and we're back where we started in March.
Come on, man. We're in the middle of a third wave. Where I come from, if a girl gave you a third wave, you were practically married. Doesn't even know what time it is. It's 1:30. Come on, man.
No, it's not a wave. It's not a wave. A wave goes like this, and this is going like this, okay? And sure, there's been a tiny coronavirus spike in Florida, and a teensy spike in Arizona, and a toonsy-woonsy in North Dakota. But who cares? A lot of people don't know this, but we've got another Dakota there somewhere, okay?
You don't even have a plan for me. First I'm creepy, then I'm sleepy. You say I have dementia. Then you say I'm a criminal mastermind. Which one is it, Kimosabe?
Look, I can't show you my plan. It's under audit along with my taxes, which are prepaid just like a drug dealer's telephone. And I take full responsibility for the coronavirus, even though it came from China on a plane piloted by Nancy Pelosi, filled with Mexicans, which we shot down over Pedo Island.
Come on! Don't fall for that, America. And I hate to curse in front of a woman, but that's a bunch of malarkey.
And we have our first malarkey. If you're playing Biden bingo at home, take a shot. I have saved exactly 60 seconds for climate change. Mr. Vice President.
Well, since we're almost out of time, oil no, wind yes, fracking depends on what state I'm in.
This guy and his wind. He loves wind. Look, I know more about wind than anyone, okay? Wind kills all the birds, chops them right up like a magic bullet, and turns them into bird guacamole, okay? It makes golf shots go bad, and sometimes it gets real fast and turns into a twister and throws a cow right on top of Helen Hunt.
So I thought that was, like I said, I always enjoy the Alec Baldwin, Donald Trump, and Biden was definitely more alert and feisty in, I think, Jim Carrey's impression this week. Like I said, they did satirize some of his funny sayings, and of course, like I said, his shifting position on fracking and oil. That is actually something real to satirize, not this made-up dementia thing. Anyway, the one other thing I saw people were talking about drinking games. Somebody in the live comments was saying you're going to do a drinking game if any of my clips were sped up. I don't think any of them are sped up this week, but that reminds me of the other thing I liked about that Saturday Night Live cold open is the drinking game with some of the weird phrases that Joe Biden says. And one thing that Saturday Night Live cold open did, it reminds me of The Simpsons, where sometimes they do this thing where there are like too many jokes on the screen, where there are all these things where you have to like pause it and go back and look. And so this is the bingo card that Maya Rudolph as Kristen Welker was holding up. And you can see there's like Amtrak, my dad would say, a whole bunch of stuff. And then like the second to the left in the bottom row there, I had no idea what that was. I think it says Pogue Moothoin, or I'm totally mispronouncing that, I'm sure, but I looked it up and it's like kiss my ass in Gaelic. So has anyone ever heard Biden say that? But anyway, I wanted to zoom in there and give you like the extra analysis of the too many jokes that you might not have seen on Saturday Night Live. So does that give me fair use media criticism that allows me to take that clip and show it to you without violating Saturday Night Live's copyright? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But now I'm going to get to the news summaries, and I usually start with NBC News' Meet the Press, but Jake Tapper is just tearing it up on CNN State of the Union. I actually have two guest clips from Jake Tapper. I only have one guest clip from all the other shows. Both Jake Tapper's did a incredible cross-examination of White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. I'm only going to be able to show you some of that. He had this great commentary at the end where he tore apart Trump's terrible response to the coronavirus, which is, of course, why Trump seems to be losing. And he really hones in on COVID-19 and the coronavirus crisis in just like a 90-second open here where we're all the state of, Jake Tapper always says, what's the State of the Union this week? And we're alarmed. We're alarmed with the COVID outbreaks, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that first news summary from CNN this morning over here.
We're in Washington, where the State of our Union is alarmed at the latest pandemic data. Just 9 days until Election Day, and today a worrisome late October surprise, a new coronavirus outbreak tied to the White House, this time hitting Vice President Pence's inner circle. The Vice President's Chief of Staff, Mark Short, has now tested positive, as well as Marty Obst, one of Pence's top outside political advisors, and at least one other member of Pence's White House staff, according to an official. Vice President Pence is, of course, the head of the coronavirus task force and was a close contact of Mark Short's. But according to the White House, the vice president has tested negative for the virus and is choosing to stay on the campaign trail. You can see him here yesterday campaigning without a mask. The White House says it's okay for Pence to be out there because he is a, quote, essential worker, though it is not yet clear how campaigning is essential work as opposed to, say, being in his office trying to use the levers of government to get control of the pandemic. But even as the virus spreads within the White House, again, the president is out on the campaign trail telling Americans that the virus is, quote, rounding the turn and criticizing the news media for covering the pandemic. It is staggering and dangerous misinformation as the virus is actually spreading more rapidly across the country, according to health experts. Saturday, the U.S. hit more than 83,000 cases. That's the second highest day in the U.S. since the pandemic began. The highest day? Friday. Overall, the virus has infected more than 8.5 million Americans and killed nearly 225,000. Joining me now to discuss this and much more, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Mark, thanks so much.
And like I said, I will have a clip of Jake Tapper's brutal cross-examination of Mark Meadows coming up. That will be clip number 8. And I don't know, is it like I came up with that term last week for the Laura Trump cross-examination that she got tappered? I don't know if you think Mark Meadows gets tappered, but we can talk about that when we get to clip 8. The next news summary is the one I usually show first, NBC News Meet the Press, just because it's the longest, most extensive summary of what happened during the week. They usually get most of the important things, although in the Trump era, there's so many news cycles, so many scandals, you can't really put them all in there, but I think most of them fit into the 4-minute, 40-second news summary from NBC News' Meet the Press that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. 9 days. 9 days before Americans finally decide who will take the oath of office on January 20th. 9 days before control of the United States Senate could be determined. And 9 days before we have a sense of whether the country says, yes, we want 4 more years of President Trump, or whether voters say they've had enough and they choose Joe Biden. Thursday's debate probably changed little, which may be a good thing if you're ahead nationally by roughly 9 points, as Biden is right now. But where does this race stand? Here's an easy way to look at it. Let's start with the 2016 election map that President Trump rode to victory. Now, let's assume right now, as the campaigns are assuming, that Joe Biden takes 2 Trump states where he's been consistently ahead all year, Wisconsin and Michigan. Throw in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, as Nebraska splits their electoral votes, where he's also leading. If that happens, it leaves President Trump with this path. He could not afford to lose any of the following states: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, or Arizona. And right now, he is trailing in all 4 right now, but they are close. But again, if he loses any one of them, it's game over. Remember, this also assumes that Mr. Trump hangs on to Ohio and to Iowa and to Georgia and to Texas, all of which right now, neck and neck. And if Mr. Trump was searching for an October surprise, he did get it, but it may not be the one he was looking for. We're now well into a frightening record 3rd surge of COVID cases that has just hit Vice President Pence's staff very hard, just as Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden are making their closing arguments.
The people of Wisconsin must stop these anti-American radicals by giving Joe Biden a thundering defeat.
Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. We got to show them who we are.
With Joe Biden, you got 47 years of all talk, no action.
Oh, we're turning the corner on this. He just said that this week. The nerve.
If he can't answer a tough question like, what would you like to do in your 2nd term? Then it's our job to make sure he doesn't get a 2nd term.
With 9 days to go and 60 million votes already cast, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are making their closing arguments. Trailing in the polls, President Trump is still searching for a message that will stick.
Joe Biden admitted that he wants to abolish the oil industry. That wasn't too good. Texas, are you watching? Right? Pennsylvania.
Hoping to capitalize on this debate exchange.
Would you close down the oil industry?
By the way, I would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I will
that's
transition.
A big statement.
It is a big statement.
That's a
because
big statement.
I would stop.
Why would you do that?
Because the oil industry pollutes significantly. I'm not banning fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
It's the latest Trump message after weeks of struggling to land on one.
Last night, Biden refused to rule out court packing. In other words, they may take 16, 17, 18 people. You can't let Biden be president because he's not at the top of his game mentally. Remember we said that? Where's Hunter? That we made the T-shirt. It was the #1 selling T-shirt.
But the president's attempt to replicate the 2016 victory with an October surprise is falling flat in the midst of a crisis where he is losing the public's trust.
That's all I hear about now. That's all I hear. Turn on television. Right? COVID, 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 COVID. A plane goes down. 500 people dead. They don't talk about it. By the way, on November 4th, you won't hear about it anymore.
Friday marked the highest daily number of cases since the pandemic began, with hospitals in the West and Midwest overwhelmed and death counts rising.
In my 34 years as a physician, I have never seen so much suffering from a single disease over such a short period of time.
We are reporting 3,874 new cases for a total of 33 confirmed cases since the start of this pandemic. Excuse me, please.
We're learning to live with it. As I told him, we're not learning to live it, we're learning to die with it. Because it's doing nothing.
As the pandemic surges, President Trump appears focused on personal grievances rather than on governing.
Nobody's ever gone through what I've gone through. Nobody. No president's ever gone through this. No president. Anybody else would have gone to a corner, sat down in the corner of a room, put their thumb in their mouth, and say, "Mommy, Mommy, take me home, please."
Joining me now is Trump campaign senior advisor Corey Lewandowski. Corey, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning.
And Corey Lewandowski, they try to do an interview and then his audio goes out and they come back to him. They had technical difficulties, and I'm not going to give you a clip of Corey Lewandowski. The clip I have is from the Biden communications director, Kate Bedingfield. That I have that paired. That's clip number 11 after clip 10, which is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about Biden's shifting position on fracking and transitioning out of oil. And anyway, that will be the last Meet the Press clip I show you. Like I said, I think that was a pretty extensive summary of a lot of the stuff that went on during the week. Held Trump accountable for a bunch of his lies and bad policies. Showed what's going on with the campaign. So you can let me, I know there are a lot of Chuck Todd haters out there, although a lot of what you saw there, Chuck Todd narrates it, but he has producers who create a lot of that. So it's not even Chuck Todd that I'm complimenting when I say good things about the news summary. The next one is CBS News Face the Nation, and they always have the best news summaries or the best coverage of COVID and coronavirus. I've talked about this many, many weeks. How back in January and February, they were the only ones covering this coronavirus thing going on in China, and at the time I said they were either overhyping the danger or they were the only one of the big five outlets who was actually covering the biggest story of the year, and like I've said many times, turned out to be number 2. So sometimes I even say CBS, maybe it should be like the COVID broadcasting system or whatever, but just the way they cover it so much. And they also have the most extensive coverage from Mark Strassman hanging out in Atlanta because he's never getting his CDC interview. And then at the end, they get to their Battleground tracking poll that I'm not going to show that part of the clip, but there's a image at the end that I'll come back to about what's going on that makes me think that Biden is probably going to win. Not definitely, but probably going to win at the end of the COVID-19 coverage, and then some of the voting that's going on. There is some of the other coverage, and they sort of like weave in the candidates as it fits into the COVID-19 coverage from CBS News' Face the Nation this morning. Over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we come on the air this morning, more than 58.5 million Americans have already voted. Meanwhile, there are alarming new records being set when it comes to cases of coronavirus here in the U.S. Experts say we are facing an increasingly bleak outlook for the virus in the next few months. We begin today with CBS national correspondent Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
Day by day, lab results bear witness of COVID spread and a deepening American sorrow. On Friday and Saturday, new cases nationwide topped 83,000, and have spiked 248% since the start of September. Americans may be in for a grim winter. 31 states are in the red zone for new cases. That's up from 26 last week. 11 states broke single-day records this week. Wisconsin's in crisis, home to 7 of the country's top 10 metro areas for new cases. Wisconsin's also a battleground state, 9 days before Election Day, as is Florida, where President Trump voted early on Saturday.
I voted for a guy named Trump.
Presumably, Vice President Pence did too. The next day, 5 of his staff tested positive, including his chief of staff, Mark Short. Early voting's now underway in all 50 states and setting records in many, including Georgia. Nearly 3 million Georgians have already voted, more than double the record set 4 years ago. There's a push to the polls here from various groups. One called Black Voters Matter will pass out 250,000 voting flyers. A QR code on each lists nearby polls and real-time wait times in a state dogged by allegations of voter suppression targeting communities of color.
If anybody's going to make a decision about you, you need to be a part of that process.
And of a separate process called grieving. In Washington, D.C. lies a field of white flags hanging sadly. Each honors one of America's 225,000 COVID dead. That death toll is one of the many drivers in the early vote stampede.
I'm coming out to vote. My life depends on it.
Even on a Sunday, this Atlanta library is open for early voting. Former Vice President Biden will campaign here on Tuesday because Georgia is considered a toss-up. Our new CBS Battleground Tracker poll out this morning shows this race is tied at 49 apiece. Margaret?
Mark, thank you. We want to take a closer look now at 2 other states. President Trump won both in 2016, but now former Vice President Joe Biden is in the lead. In Florida, he is up 2 points ahead of the president. In North Carolina, Mr. Biden is at 51%, and Mr. Trump 4 points behind him at 47%. CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto joined.
And I'm not going to show you that Anthony Salvanto clip, but as I usually point out, if you click down on the CBS News Face the Nation link I put in the video description, it actually goes to their YouTube channel where they take the whole program and cut it into segments, and I'm sure Anthony Salvanto's segment is a separate video you can click on. And, you know, I thought that was good coverage, and you saw the vice president get covered there. You saw they, like I said before, I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, except you saw Georgia, Florida, North Carolina all looking like they might go to Biden. The Democrat winning Florida, North Carolina, Georgia. I mean, that's one of the possible things that could happen. That is one of the reasons there could be an anti-Trump landslide. That's what I'm hoping for. Florida we may know about early, and that's something I'll talk about when I get to the last clip with Nate Silver, talking about how if Biden wins the Sunbelt states, we'll know early that we can breathe a sigh of relief. But if it's up to the Midwest, it may take longer, but I'm getting ahead of myself on that. But I did promise to show that last screenshot of the Electoral College Battleground Tracker poll here from CBS. And you can see, if you put together the leaning and likely Democratic states for Biden and the leaning and likely Trump states in red, so Biden has 279 already with the leaning and likely states. You only need 270 to win, as I'm sure most of you know. So that's one of the reasons that I'm saying it looks favorable for Biden. I mean, if you believe the polls, then that's something that seems pretty obvious is going to happen. But there's still 9 days. Who knows which way the momentum is going? Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I happen to think things are trending towards an anti-Trump landslide. I'm not saying it's impossible for Trump to win, and I don't think anyone should be complacent. But I don't know, maybe even next week, my last live stream before the election, Maybe I should call it like anti-Trump landslide ? I don't know. I'll see what happens in the next week. So much happens. So much could happen in 9 days. So anyway, I wanted to show you that screenshot. Make sure you didn't miss it. And then I talked about how things are looking good for Biden. But in this next news summary from ABC, I'm pretty sure Martha Raddatz, who's in as the co-host, I guess, of This Week, even though it's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. It should be This Week with George Stephanopoulos or Martha Raddatz, right? But anyway, Martha Raddatz is in hosting This Week, and this one, I think, downplays the COVID spike. At least it's in there. They show a chart of it going up, like Alec Baldwin said, it can't be a third wave because it's going and that's actually what I use for my thumbnail is Alec Baldwin is Donald Trump saying it can't be a third wave because it's just going up, 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 up. But that is briefly mentioned here, but they really focus on the politics. They're in Pennsylvania, which could be the deciding state. It's quite possible, so I can't fault them for that focus. And then they talk to a bunch of voters, and I'm only going to show you the first one because this is a loyal Trump voter who uses a key phrase. Also talks about how at the very end how the way Trump talks about politics is just the way she talks about with her friends when they're drinking, talking politics. They sound just like Trump, which I don't think that's a complimentary thing to say about yourself. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this 3-minute news summary from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos and Martha Raddatz, because she's actually hosting, and I think she's like permanent co-host, or I can never remember her actual title, but here's her news summary this morning that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Welcome to This Week. We join you this morning from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Battleground, Pennsylvania, once again set to play a key role in this consequential and contentious election. Around this point 4 years ago, Trump behind in the polls by 4 points, ultimately winning this state in 2016 by less than 1 point. Today, he's down by 6 percentage points, according to 538's polling average. And while 52% of suburban Pennsylvania voters went for Trump in 2016, helping to put him over the edge, according to one recent poll, nearly 60% of likely voters in the Pennsylvania suburbs are now backing Biden. Our partners at 538 say Pennsylvania is the state most likely to be the tipping point in 2020, potentially putting either candidate over the top. And with just 1 week and 2 days to go to the final votes, COVID cases are surging across America. More cases reported on Friday than any other day since the pandemic began. Now, more than 8.5 million cases nationwide. And overnight, we learned the vice president's chief of staff has tested positive. Despite being considered a close contact to the top aide, Pence is set to stick with his current schedule, continuing to campaign. It's against this backdrop that both candidates are making their final pitches. And with few days left in this cycle, every moment counts. Both campaigns barnstorming Pennsylvania this week, but so many voters have already made up their minds. At least 57 million Americans have cast their ballots. This morning, we begin with the voices of voters, where they stand at this critical juncture in a race where anything can happen. The last installment of our series, 6 for the Win. Driving through Pennsylvania, it's easy to see the intensity of election fever. From the cities to the suburbs, stretching to the rural areas, campaign signs compete with the fall foliage for top billing.
I would say everything. All his policies I agree with 100%.
About 10 miles west of Philadelphia, 60-year-old Tanya Seletsky is the kind of enthusiastic supporter the Trump campaign hopes will prevail in this must-win state. Is there anything over the last 4 years that has given you pause about Donald Trump?
I would say no at this point, because when I'm researching what he does say, there's facts backing it up. I see social media, I'm very active on social media, so I do my research. Things that he brings up are exactly what me and my friends talk about in our kitchen. When we're sitting around having drinks and talking about politics and government, he's exactly spot on.
In 2016...
So yeah, Tanya Zelinsky, is that her? Got her name there. The Trump vote. Martha Raddatz goes on. If you click on the link to This Week with George Stephanopoulos, I think depending on your cable subscription status, you may have to wait a while before you can watch the full episode. I'm not sure, but anyway, you can see they go through all sorts of voters. Like that was the loyal Trump voter. Then the next two voters are a couple who like voted for Trump, but they're sick of all the chaos and the noise, and they go, and then they eventually find a Hispanic man for Trump, which in Pennsylvania. No, I think he was a Puerto Rican, a man from Puerto Rico in Pennsylvania who supports Trump, which that's got to be like some sort of political unicorn, but. So you can watch it all yourself, like I said, if you watch the entire episode. But I stopped it there because I didn't want to get into all that reporting from ABC. The one thing I think Martha Raddatz missed in that conversation is a phrase that Tanya used that I see in my comments section all the time, and it's like a hallmark of the QAnon member. It's the do your own research. You see, if you watch that clip again in that last minute with Tanya Zelinsky or whatever her name was, she says like do your own research like twice. And when they say do your own research, they mean find like crazy sources, not like reliable sources, not like, as I've mentioned before, I actually have an undergraduate history degree, and to get my history degree, I had to do a senior essay based on primary source material. It was the attempted international control of atomic weapons at the end of World War II based on the collected papers of Dean Acheson, Henry Stimson, and Bernard Baruch, and I had to go to all their actual collected papers of those three people and look through the archives, and so I know how to do my research, and I don't think that's what the QAnon people mean. I think they mean find like crazy conspiracy theory sources on the internet and believe what they say. So I don't think do your research means what they think it means, is the point I was trying to make from that clip, and that was kind of a long way around to make that point. But anyway, like I said about that ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary before I showed it, my one criticism is they kind of buried the COVID-19 spike. They did show that chart where it's going up and up and up, and that's why I put it closest to the Fox News Sunday news summary that, last week I said I watched all the way through and they almost never mentioned COVID. This time they do kind of mention it the way you saw it in the ABC clip, where there's like a brief mention from David Spunt reporting on Trump, and then they go to Jacqui Heinrich, who reports mostly on Biden vacillating on fracking, and that's why it's, of course, the most biased of the news summaries. The last news summary that most underplays the biggest story, the coming dark winter, as Biden said in the last debate, or just the next 3 months to, maybe 5 months is going to be the worst, darkest part of this pandemic for the United States, according to all the information we have, which is not emphasized very strongly in the news summary from Fox News Sunday this morning. I will discuss with you a little more after you watch Chris Wallace, David Spunt, and Jacqui Heinrich give you the news over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. With just over a week to Election Day, early voting is now underway in all 50 states, with more than 57 million votes already cast. President Trump and Joe Biden have shared a stage for the last time. Now both candidates are in a final race to the finish, and both campaigns are preparing for the possibility the outcome won't be known on election night 9 days from now. We begin with Fox team coverage. Jacqui Heinrich is tracking Joe Biden's campaign. But let's start with David Spunt in Manchester, New Hampshire, where the president holds a rally today. David.
Chris, New Hampshire has 4 electoral votes. President Trump lost this state in 2016. He's currently down here in the polls, but he's been doing a lot of traveling. Yesterday, he held rallies in 3 different states.
Thank you very much.
President Trump spent part of his evening Saturday in Wisconsin after stops in North Carolina and Ohio. He woke up Saturday morning at his Palm Beach estate in Must-Win, Florida, and went to the local library to vote.
I voted for a guy named Trump.
Although tens of millions of Americans have already voted, the Trump campaign is counting on a large in-person turnout on Election Day. The president hoping a silent majority delivers.
These polls are much better than 4 years ago, by the way. In fact, now they're getting awfully close. Now, because they can't be embarrassed a second time.
The president's strategy, focus on law and order and the economy pre-COVID. Over the weekend, infection rates climbed with a new daily record of 85,000 cases.
Nobody tests like us. Cases, everybody uses the word cases. Mortality, way down.
And Chris, we've learned that Vice President Mike Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, tested positive for coronavirus. Despite being in close contact with Mr. Short, the vice president is maintaining a rigorous schedule and will travel. He has a rally tonight in North Carolina. Chris.
David Spunt traveling with the president in New Hampshire. David, thank you. Now let's bring in Jacqui Heinrich, who's covering the Biden campaign in Wilmington, Delaware. Jacqui.
Chris, with 9 days to go, Joe Biden is buttoning up policy questions in must-win battlegrounds as the Democrats' biggest weapon, former President Barack Obama, drums up energy.
A double take in Pennsylvania.
I will not ban fracking, period. I'm not banning fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Joe Biden working hard to ensure his debate night pledge to transition away from fossil fuels doesn't cost him. That same night, he clarified.
But we're not going to be rid of fossil fuels for a long time. It will not be gone for probably 2050.
But it's a minor derailment from the broader strategy of making the election a referendum on President Trump and his handling of coronavirus. Former President Barack Obama picked up that message in another must-win swing state, Florida.
It won't be so exhausting just having a normal president. You'll be able to go about your lives knowing that the president's not going to suggest injecting bleach.
His second stop on the campaign trail as hot a roast as his first, pushing the back-to-earth message about the Trump alternative.
We won't have a president who threatens people with jail for just criticizing him. That's not normal behavior, Florida.
With Joe Biden focusing on the must-win battlegrounds, his surrogates and running mate are focusing on the harder-to-win states. You've got Kamala Harris. Yesterday, she was in Ohio. She was in Georgia on Friday, and that is where Dr. Jill Biden makes an appearance tomorrow. Chris.
Jacqui, thank you. Joining us.
Oh, and that was Ronna McDaniel. That's the next clip I'm going to show you, and it follows the pattern I've said many times over the 7+ years I've been doing this Sunday live clip roundup, that on Fox News Sunday they'll downplay some story that is really the biggest news story that hurts the Republicans, coronavirus. I think you have to agree that they downplayed the seriousness, the spikes, they covered it briefly, kind of like ABC did, like I said before the clip. But they definitely downplayed it. And then what I've said over and over again is that then Chris Wallace will try to clean up the news summary by bringing up the main story that they didn't cover well enough in the news summary with one of the guests, which is the next clip that I'm going to show you in just a sec with Ronna Romney McDaniel. She somehow Trump made her drop her Romney at some point. I believe she's Mitt Romney's niece, but she's just Ronna McDaniel. She's the head of the Republican Party, and Chris Wallace is about to cross-examine her. I I mean, well, I think I pretty much pre-criticized that Fox News Sunday clip, but if you want to know why it is that it seems like it came through some it's sort of the same facts from the previous news summaries put through some weird partisan lens, I suggest you read this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, where he explains how the Fox News was created not to be a news organization, but to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, which is what it pretty much is. That doesn't mean no journalism occurs there, but it is almost incidental or sort of like a cover story for what's really going on. And of course, I talk about doing this live stream for 7+ years, but I've actually started my YouTube channel like 14 years ago. And I spent the first half, even more, creating a Fox News bias playlist of over 200 examples of Fox News bias that complements the reporting that you get from Gabriel Sherman in The Loudest Voice in the Room. So I want to point that out. But now I will get to Chris Wallace making up for the Fox News bias in that news summary you saw by giving even more facts. Why weren't they in the news summary about how bad the spike is, how cases are going up, how hospitalizations are going up, how Trump is, downplaying the virus? There's a couple Trump clips here. There's one at the end where he's like going, COVID, 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 COVID. It's, basically saying it's a media creation, and Chris Wallace confronts the head of the Republican Party with Trump's rhetoric. But why wasn't it in the news summary? Anyway, I'll talk about that more after we watch that clip together over here.
On Friday, Chairman, the U.S. set a new single-day record for COVID cases in the country, more than 85,000. That same day, here's what the president had to say. Take a look.
We're not entering a dark winter. We're entering the final turn and approaching the light at the end of the tunnel. That's the way I looked at it.
The single worst day of the pandemic, and the president says we're entering, or we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. What is he talking about?
Well, Chris, as you know, we have a vaccine on the horizon. There are many, many trials that are in phase 3. We're getting closer and closer to that vaccine. Obviously, the testing has ramped up. The therapeutics are working well. Mortality rates are down. So we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, especially when we get this vaccine at the end of this year or early next year.
But the top experts say we're not going to see a vaccine till the end of the year. The president's own health experts say that it's not going to be readily available to the public till the summer. Again, let's look at the actual numbers of what we're going through right now. 85,085 new cases on Friday. Hospitalizations increased in 38 states over the past week. More than 170 counties in 36 states designated hotspots. Deaths averaging over 1,000 a day. Meanwhile, the president is holding rallies, thousands of people packed together, most of them not wearing masks. And again, here's what the president said yesterday.
You turn on television, like, COVID, 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 COVID. A plane goes down, 500 people dead. They don't talk about it. COVID, 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 COVID. By the way, on November 4th, you won't hear about it anymore.
Again, what is the president talking about?
Well, let's look at the timeline. Chris, the president saved lives by shutting down travel to China, which Joe Biden obviously disagreed with. He shut down the economy that was booming, 30 days to slow the spread so that we could get the PPE, we could get the ventilators, and we could make sure the hospitals were not overwhelmed. Now we've seen
we are talking
in
about
record
things that
time.
But
let's
Chairman
talk about
McDaniel,
no, because it is an important timeline.
You're talking about things that happened last January.
But it's an important timeline, Chris, because this is in less than a year.
He's making it sound, but he's making it sound as if this is a media invention after November 4th, that we're not going to hear about COVID anymore.
But
we had 85,000 cases on Friday.
If you can let me finish, the point is, if what has happened in less than a year, now we have the testing, we've tested more than any other country, we're on track to a vaccine because of Operation Warp Speed, and the president using the military will be able to distribute that vaccine quickly. We're seeing mortality rates go down. We see that we have enough ventilators, we have enough PPE, the hospitals are not being overwhelmed. This is a very contagious virus that has hit the whole world. This is a global pandemic. Rates are up across the world. We've never seen anything like this, and in less than a year, it is remarkable that we are on track to a vaccine. These are positive steps. Of course, this is something we've never seen before. Of course, the president has harnessed every part of the private sector of the government to make sure that we're making these strides. And Joe Biden continues to scare the American people and say dark days are ahead. And the president chooses to be positive and say there is a bright future ahead, and we are on track to a vaccine to combat a virus like the world has never seen before. These are positive things, and it's happened under the leadership of President Trump.
I want to move on. But I just have to point out, in fact, we are running out of hospital beds in a number of states. And as I pointed out, hospitalizations are up in 38 states right now. Let's move on to another subject. Since the
So what do you think? Did Chris Wallace's cross-examination of Romney McDaniel there make up for the lack of focus on the COVID-19 crisis that this country's going into in the news summary? I mean, why weren't all the facts that he used to cross-examine her in that news summary? That's the question I always ask when I point out this discongruity that always seems to happen. Well, not always, but often seems to happen on Fox News Sunday. Before I move on to the next newsmaker clip, which is the one I promised you of Jake Tapper cross-examining another Republican, Mark Meadows. This is the second of the three Republicans I have. That was Ronna, Romney, McDaniel, then Mark Meadows, then Robert O'Brien, the White House National Security Advisor. Then I'll have two Democrats after that, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and reading the live comments along the way, and I noticed I got a couple Super Chat contributions from Tom Trask and Lulu Girl, and I appreciate the people who support my channel financially through those live stream Super Chat contributions. There's a join button down below the video. There's also links down in the video description for direct PayPal contributions and to become a monthly patron on Patreon. For those last two options, at least at the $5 level, you get one of these weatherproof vinyl stickers. At the $10 level, you get the sticker plus this ACLU Constitution. And here's a screenshot of the Super Chat contributions. So Tom Trask, I don't know what happened to Sexy Bob. When I first put up the live event, announcing the live stream at like noon my time, Sexy Bob was there. I said, I think he posted a comment about it starting at 3 p.m. my time, and I said that was the earliest possible, and I ended up delaying it a couple hours, maybe. I don't know what happened to Sexy Bob. And then Lulu Girl, you asked a question about who should be Biden's attorney general. I hadn't really thought about that. One person who I think deserves a reward, there are a couple different rewards I can think of for this person, is California Representative Adam Schiff. I think he would be a great attorney general. I don't know if he's interested in the job at all. Or another place I think he might be great is, Kamala Harris. If she becomes vice president, then there is an opening in California for a senator. Governor Gavin Newsom, I don't know if he'd be willing to appoint an old white guy like Adam Schiff, but Adam Schiff also, I think, deserves that, because very few people on the Democratic side have taken as much negative fallout of Trump's wrath as, Adam Schiff, what is he, Shifty Schiff, and the whole impeachment thing, and they've really attacked him for saying there was evidence of collusion, even though there was evidence of collusion. I've even talked about there were like 3 different ways there was evidence of collusion, and I don't want to go off on that whole tangent, but I hope that I hadn't really thought about who should be Biden's attorney general, and I'm not saying if this is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Adam Schiff is not my final answer, but it's like the first thing I could come up with. So I hope that's worth your super chat contribution, Lulu Girl. I appreciate Tom Trask and Lulu Girl for doing that. And now I'm going to get to the next cross-examination. You know, Chris Wallace at least made up for his news summary, but Jake Tapper totally tappered, I guess. I've decided he's totally tappered Mark Meadows this morning, and this is only part of it. He had this great comeback to the more testing, more cases thing, where he said in the last few weeks, testing's gone up like 16%, but cases have gone up 55%. I don't think that's in this clip, but there are some other great cross-examinations of Mark Meadows. This is... I mean, this is almost 6 minutes. It's not quite from the beginning, but it starts off with the thing you saw, or the breaking news you heard in a lot of the news summaries, that several people, I think it's now up to like 5 close staff members to the Vice President, Mike Pence, have tested positive for COVID-19, but Mike Pence is still out there, a lot of times not wearing a mask, at rallies, being, you know, another Trump super spreader maybe. And anyway, I'll talk about Jake Tapper's cross-examination of Mark Meadows a little more after we watch the White House Chief of Staff. By the end of this clip, the last sentence is almost unintelligible, as I'll talk about when we get there in 5 minutes, 47 seconds together. Over here.
So Mark, Pence advisor Marty Opes tested positive days ago, and that was not disclosed to the public at the time. According to the New York Times, quote, 2 people briefed on the matter said that the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, had sought to keep news of the outbreak from becoming public. Why would you do that? Is it because it's yet another sign of how much the White House has failed to contain the virus?
Yeah, obviously that's not a report. That's actually a tweet. And when we look at this, when we're really talking about...
No, that was in the New York Times story. That was in the New York Times story.
When we actually have people's health at risk, what we look at there, Jake, is sharing personal information is not something that we should do, not something that we do actually do, unless it's the Vice President or the President or someone that's very close to them where there's people in harm's way. Listen, anytime that there's someone in harm's way, we have an obligation to let people know, to contact trace. We have done that. We did
Chris
that.
Christie says you didn't do that with him.
In this particular, well, in that vein, when you look at Chris Christie, it's within 48 hours of symptoms. And when we looked at the president, there was not a contact within 48 hours of the president where he would qualify under CDC guidelines. We actually have a CDC person in bed. Hold on, Jay. We've got a CDC person embedded here in the White House that helps us with contact tracing
right. No, I understand
each and every
that.
day.
So, yeah. Mark Short has been in close contact with Vice President Pence. I mean, they are always with each other. Short is now positive for the virus.
That's correct.
So CDC guidelines say that Vice President Pence should quarantine for 14 days. Now, I understand the White House is trying to get around that by saying the Vice President is an essential worker. But, Mark, how is going all over the country, how is that campaigning? How is that essential work? It's not like he's helping to contain the virus. In fact, the opposite. He's holding rallies that could be spreading the virus.
Well, actually, he's not just campaigning, he's working. We saw a Middle East peace agreement with Sudan in the Oval Office that the president engaged in. And for anybody to suggest that the president has been out campaigning and not getting things done, all you have to do is look at the facts.
He was at a campaign rally in Tallahassee. He was just in a campaign rally in Tallahassee.
I'm not saying he's not campaigning. I'm saying that is only part of what he's doing. And as we look at that, essential personnel, whether it's the Vice President of the United States or anyone else,
but he's not
has to continue
following
on.
CDC guidelines.
Well, no, Jake, CDC guidelines does say essential personnel.
Yes, it says
they
wear a
mask
mask.
up,
if they wear a mask.
And I spoke to the Vice President last night at midnight, and I can tell you that what he's doing is wearing a mask, socially distancing, and when he goes up to speak, he will take the mask off, put it back on. But he's wearing a mask as it relates to this particular thing because the doctors have advised him to do that. And so, Jake, when we start to look at this, you know, here's where we really need to make sure. On your website yesterday, Jake, your website is talking about, well, now we think the spread is coming from small social groups and family groups. First it was large groups, now it's small groups.
It's
now
coming from all sorts of places.
Well,
it's
that's
coming from
exactly,
all sorts of places
that's
because
exactly
the pandemic's
point.
out of control.
So here's what we have to do. We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and other mitigation
Why aren't we going to get
areas
control of the pandemic?
Because it is a contagious virus, just like the flu.
Yeah, but why not make efforts to contain it?
Well, we are making efforts to contain it.
By running all over the country, not wearing a mask?
Jake,
that's what the vice president's doing.
We can get into the back and forth. Let me just say this. Is what we need to do is make sure that we have the proper mitigation factors, whether it's therapies or vaccines or treatments, to make sure that people don't die from this. But to suggest that we're going to actually quarantine all of America, lock down our economy.
No one's saying that.
Well, they are. Joe Biden's saying that. He says lock everybody down. We're going to have a dark winter. We're going to have a dark winter.
That's what health officials say. That's what health officials say, that it's going to get worse.
No,
we
that's
had the
Joe
two
Biden's
worst days.
Jake,
let's be honest. Infections, Friday and Saturday.
Let's be honest here. The health officials did not say dark winter. Those were Joe Biden's words.
He was quoting a health official. I think he was quoting William Haseltine.
When we look at the number of cases increasing, what we have to do is make sure that we fight it with therapeutics and vaccines, take proper mitigation factors in terms of social distancing and masks when we can. And when we look at this, we're going to defeat it, Jake, because we're Americans. We do that, and this president is leading while Joe Biden is sitting there suggesting that we're going to mandate masks.
The president is holding rallies all over the country.
That's correct.
No
In fact,
masks,
we're leaving.
No masks required, no distancing. There have already been, according to health officials, contact tracing. There have already been cases of individuals in Minnesota and in Washington, D.C., and in Oklahoma that got the virus at these Trump rallies that Dr. Fauci himself called a super spreader event, the one at the White House.
There's also been contact tracing, Jake.
That is not leading.
There's also been contact tracing from reporters, some with your own group, where they actually have worn masks religiously. And so what I'm here to tell you is we need to find the vaccines and the therapeutics to actually give Americans the relief that this is not a death sentence, because it's not. And yet at the same time, to suggest that any of that is not accurate is just not based on the facts.
Here's the bottom.
To suggest any of that is not accurate is just not based on the facts. I think he messed up his ending of his sentence there, but he also made this crazy argument that you'll hear from National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien that people wear masks but still get the virus, so masks aren't useful. But the cloth masks are actually supposed to stop you from spreading to other people. They're not supposed to protect you. So people wearing masks getting the virus doesn't really refute that. And then, of course, the main news from that clip was where the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, says, pandemic out of control. Remember all those different White House officials? It's under control. We have it under control. It's out of control. We can't control it. It's a contagious virus. And you'll see in the next clip that I'm going to show you of Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, that Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation asks him about what Mark Meadows said in that clip. Like I said, that was almost 6 minutes long. It was an awesome cross-examination. I really recommend watching the entire interview. At one point, at the very end, Jake Tapper saying, "Your people are saying you have to go," and Mark Meadows says, "No, I'm happy to stay." And Jake says, "Oh, you can stay the whole hour." So that's how tappered Mark Meadows was getting there. You saw him attacking, like I said, the journalists who religiously wear masks but still get COVID. I mentioned the more testing, more cases was refuted in the part of the clip I didn't show that comes afterwards. There was even this weird thing where Mark Meadows kept saying, "Well, ask Biden," and Jake Tapper says, "Well, I've interviewed Biden a lot more than Trump, but we don't want to go into that." Like there's some underlying conflict between Jake Tapper and Trump where Jake Tapper doesn't get to interview Trump or something. But anyway, that's all the extra stuff that isn't in the clip I just showed you, I wanted to make sure you know about. And like I said, I recommend watching the entire cross-examination of Jake Tapper, who has been totally on a tear. In fact, the entire CNN State of the Union is worth watching. I'm going to show you one more clip with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but there's like, Jake Tapper used to do State of the Cartoonian, which was sort of this humorous comment, but then after COVID-19 started, no more political humor. Instead, there was like this polemic, this like political assassination, or I don't know, like this poison pen letter at the end of every State of the Union, which I don't take clips from, but also worth watching. Anyway, like I said, this is Margaret Brennan cross-examining Robert O'Brien a little bit on some of the same things about, you know, how is campaigning an essential work for the vice president, talking about some of these other issues. And you'll see Robert O'Brien makes the same claim that people wearing masks get COVID, so that means mask wearing isn't so great. My one criticism of Margaret Brennan is I'm showing you all the questions she asked about COVID-19. And when I saw that Robert O'Brien was going to be on one of the Sunday morning shows, I thought, oh great, someone's going to ask him about what Bob Woodward wrote in his book Rage, about how back on January 28th, Robert O'Brien was supposedly the one who told Trump that COVID-19 was going to be the worst national security threat faced in his entire presidency. Trump has kind of denied that. I was expecting... Has someone asked Robert O'Brien about this that I missed? But Margaret Brennan never asked. That's my biggest criticism. But here's what she did ask Robert O'Brien that I kind of previewed in term. You know, she asked about what Mark Meadows said in that last clip and about the vice president being a super spreader. Well, I don't think she says super spreader, but anyway, I'll talk about that clip a little more, the final Republican clip, before I get to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Kate Bedingfield for the two Democrats to end the show. Oh, and then there's Nate Silver. Is he a Democrat? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section while we watch the CBS News Face the Nation newsmaker clip from this morning over here.
Once again, the virus has put some of the very top levels of our government at risk. This time, the vice president, we've learned, has had close contact with COVID-positive staffers, yet the White House says he's still going to travel. He's being classified as an essential worker. How is campaigning essential work?
Well, the free elections are the foundation of our democracy, so I think campaigning and voting are about the most essential thing we can be doing.
Couldn't he do it virtually to be safer?
Well, I think he's taken all the precautions, and my understanding is he's tested negative, as has the second lady. I did speak with Mark Short today, who tested positive, the vice president's chief of staff, and I know he's been a frequent guest on your show. He's doing well. The symptoms are mild so far, and I wished him, and I know you and everyone else does, a speedy recovery from this virus.
We certainly do, but these climbing numbers around the country and the news that, once again, the White House is a hotspot is deeply concerning. The chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was on another network, on CNN this morning, and said, we are not going to get control of the pandemic. You were on the COVID task force. Is that the Trump administration policy now, that it's just out of control?
Well, what we're seeing is the pandemic, and I want to make clear to all your viewers and to you again, Margaret, this came to us from China, and China did not behave properly from the outset of this.
Right, but it's been here for about 8 months.
And it's all over the world as well, Margaret. As you know, it's spiking in Europe. It's running rampant through Europe. I was just in Brazil and South America to sign three new trade deals with Brazil to help Brazil and America get out of the COVID recession. It's running rampant through Brazil. This is a terrible virus. At the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to flatten the curve, and we need to protect the most vulnerable. We need to protect the elderly and those who are infirm and have pre-existing conditions. We need to protect them. But ultimately, the only thing that's going to stop this virus, there's no magic way. Masks won't do it alone. More ventilators won't do it alone. What will is a vaccine, and we're on track to have a vaccine for Americans in less than a year. It's really incredible. And it's going to be therapeutic, so that if you come down with the virus...
When is that exactly?
Well, I think we're going to have something very, very shortly, and I'm hoping by the end of the year. And as you know, there are multiple companies with very promising vaccines that are in the final phases of trials. But what we've done is we put together an Operation Warp Speed. We bought all these vaccines ahead of time. So when one proves efficacious, the U.S. military is going to distribute those all over the country. And eventually we'll do what we did with ventilators. Remember Margaret, when I was first on your show and people were concerned that there weren't going to be enough ventilators for Americans? Now we've got over 100,000 and we were able to send ventilators all over the world to save people's lives around the world. We're going to do the same thing with the vaccines. Well, and we're going to get therapeutics as well. That's how we're going to defeat this virus that came from China. And in the meantime, we've got to do everything we can to protect the infirm and the elderly.
In the meantime, should masks be mandatory at the White House?
Well, people do wear masks at the White House.
But they're not mandatory. As we know, some of the staffers to the vice president don't wear them.
Well, a lot of people do wear them, and at the NSC they're mandatory. In my shop they're mandatory, and we've had them they've been on the watch floor at the White House Situation Room from the very outset of this. Yeah. But even masks, Margaret, I was one of the early proponents, as you know. I called this thing early, I wore a mask early, and I still got COVID and survived it. You know, I want everyone to know our hearts and the president's heart just goes out to the people that have lost their loved ones and the families that have an empty chair. We love them. God bless them. We're praying for them. But the way to stop this virus, again, that came to us from China are vaccines and therapeutics. And we're going to have those very soon because of the strong work of this administration.
Okay. CDC says well into 2021. But I want to ask you about election security. I know you're very focused on that.
So you can see she asked about election security, and that's actually an important topic to ask the National Security Advisor. That weird, Proud Boy email went out to voters, I think, in Florida, or Democrats in Florida, threatening them if they didn't vote for Trump, and it turned out to be some sort of scam from Iran. And but also Russia is still has access to our voter files, which is actually something you can buy. You know, I do activism, and I've done voter canvassing where you actually can buy those voter files so it's not a big deal that Russia has them, because anyone can get them. But I'm not covering that topic. But when I saw Matthew posted a super chat contribution asking if I had clips of the plane crash, I did a little Google search. There was like a Navy plane crash in Alabama. Is that what you're talking about? Because I hadn't heard of a plane crash before I started the live stream, and that's the only thing I saw with the brief search. But anyway, like I said before I showed the clip, my biggest criticism there was the question not asked about, you even heard Robert O'Brien at one point say, you know, I called this early, and that was like the perfect opening for Margaret Brennan to say, yeah, you called it early, January 28th. Didn't you brief President Trump on how this was going to be the greatest national security threat to his presidency? But that question was not asked. I don't know why. You saw I played it all the way through till she started talking about a new topic, and she never brought it up. I don't know why. You can let me know what you think about that in the comment section. I'm going to now give you 2 Democrats, and then Nate Silver to finish the news clips. I might have a bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip, because I have 2 Dash and Sandy clips that I think I'm going to show, both of them. One's from early this morning, one's from this afternoon right before I started the show. So maybe I'll show them both. You want to see two Dandy clips tonight at the end of the show, but that's after the next 3 clips. I promised you 2 Democrats and Nate Silver. First, this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she's kind of made me rethink what I was saying earlier about, down in the video description you can watch my debate clip roundup from the final debate in Tennessee. And the one thing I said that Biden messed up was when he said he's transitioning away from oil. At one point he said 0 emissions by 2025, which I think might have been a mistake because that's too close. But it made me think, after watching this clip with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that this is kind of like the defund the police thing, which even though Biden saying no fracking and no defunding the police, there's enough ambiguity in Biden's position and then in the position of the Democratic Party that it can still energize the youth, energize the activists, energize the progressives, the people on the left of the Democratic Party, and it's really important that they're energized and they come out. They're already energized by anti-Trump enthusiasm. That's why I keep talking about an anti-Trump landslide. it's not really a pro-Biden landslide. People are just so sick, so disgusted, so anxious about the possibility of 4 more years of what we've been living through for the last 4. No. Anti-Trump sentiment is more than enough to make up for the crazed, cult-like following of our liar-in-chief, our super-spreader-in-chief, Donald Trump. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent again. Or is that a rant? Is it a tangent or a rant? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section after we listen to Jake Tapper asking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about how she feels that about the presidential candidate for the Democrats not embracing the Green New Deal that she proposed, being very ambiguous on fracking ban and the transition from oil and all the things I just talked about, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Climate change, which is an issue of tremendous importance, especially to you. You introduced a bill earlier this year that would ban all fracking nationwide within the next 5 years. To be completely candid, Vice President Biden's position on the issue of fracking has been confusing. During the primary, he sounded supportive of a ban. On Saturday, he told voters in Pennsylvania, quote, "I'm not banning fracking, period." It sounds like now he's on the other side of this issue from you. Does it bother you?
You know, it does not bother me. I believe, and I have a very strong position on fracking. You know, the science is very clear. The methane emissions from fracking are up to 64 times more powerful than CO2 emissions at trapping heat in the air. And just from a perspective of stopping climate change, you know, there is a scientific consensus. However, that is my view. Vice President Biden has made very clear that he does not agree with a fracking ban, and I consider that, you know, it will be a privilege to lobby him should we win the White House, but we need to focus on winning the White House first, and I'm happy to make my case, but I also understand that he is in disagreement on that issue.
Do you worry that his opposition to a fracking ban is going to hurt young voter turnout?
Well, you know, I believe that young people right now have a very disciplined activist mindset, and they are not here with the intent of voting for their favorite person or voting for, you know, someone that they think is perfect as president. I think young people are actually quite disciplined and quite realistic and pragmatic in their vote, and they want to vote for who they are going to lobby. Right now, young people are so clear on their stances on many political issues that they believe that they want to vote for a president that is at least going to be receptive to their advocacy, activism, and protest, frankly. And so, you know, there is no question that Joe Biden is a much better person in that position to be receptive and actually listen to the voices of advocates than Donald Trump, who is intensely focused on enriching himself and his friends.
So last year, Biden told Democratic voters he would eliminate fossil fuels as president, but listen to what he told reporters after Thursday night's debate.
We're not getting rid of fossil fuels. We're getting rid of the subsidies for fossil fuels, but we're not getting rid of fossil fuels for a long time.
We're not getting rid of fossil fuels for a long time. You were a member of Biden's climate change task force. Is that good enough for you?
Well, you know, when he says when we're eliminating subsidies, you know, I think that is, frankly, an important first step. There's a lot of folks, you know, there's a lot of folks who like to tout themselves as free market capitalists while still trying to make sure that they get as much government subsidy and propping up of the fossil fuel industry as possible. And the fact of the matter is that if you do believe in markets, solar and renewable energies are growing less and less expensive by the day. And in many areas, they are starting to become less expensive than fossil fuels. So when you eliminate government subsidies, it becomes more difficult for fossil fuels to compete in the market. And so, you know, I think while the vice president wants to make sure that that he's not doing it by government mandate or regulation. You know, I do believe that we are moving towards that future. Again, I believe that there's a way and that we should push that process along. But again, the Vice President and I's disagreements are I believe, recorded, and that's quite all right.
At the first presidential debate, Biden said, quote, I
see there are some AOC fans down in the live comment section, and I'm actually an AOC fan. I think she is a great communicator. I think she is one of the future leaders of the Democratic Party, and I'm really fine with that. I really appreciate the promise of her leadership. So I know there are a lot of people who, especially on the right, who hate her, and I don't know why exactly. What did it? There's, I don't know. Anyway, you can let me know more what you think about that in the comment section. But that was more the progressive response to, like, let's get Biden elected, and then we'll spend the next 4 years trying to push him to the left, which that's what I'm hoping is going to happen, and what I will be planning to do for the 4 years after Biden's election, to move the country more to the left than the centrist old white guy that Biden is, that seems to be who we need to beat Donald Trump, seems to be beating Donald Trump. I don't know. Maybe anyone could have beaten Donald Trump given his COVID-19 pandemic crisis, poor leadership, his dishonest, I mean, maybe anyone could have beaten him given what happened, but he seemed to be all ready to run against Bernie with the whole socialism thing, and you saw in the debate how Biden said he seems to have forgotten who he's running against. He's running against Joe Biden. Joe Biden. I beat all those other people, so was that enough to push him over the edge, or is it an anti-Trump landslide that anyone could have ridden to victory? That's like one of those counterfactuals that we'll never know the answer to, but I'm looking forward to knowing the answer to who wins. But anyway, I wanted to contrast what AOC said in that last clip with the more centrist answer from Biden's communications director, Kate Bedingfield. She does get one. Of course, instead of talking, more deeply about the issues like AOC did, she gets in a zinger about the, this is Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press asking a somewhat confrontational question about, given all of Biden, he says the same thing Jake Tapper said, which is pretty obvious, that Biden has kind of obscured his real position on fracking and fossil fuels to make himself more electable. And so should someone whose job is on the line take that to mean that they're basically going to be screwed? And there's a good zinger here from Kate Bedingfield I'll talk about with you a little more. I won't spoil it, but I'll tell you what I think it was, and you'll probably see it after we watch it together over here.
Remark late in the debate about the oil industry, where the former vice president said he wants to transition away from the oil industry. And look, some of these remarks that he has said them before. But let me ask the question to you this way, Kate. If you work in the oil industry, if you believe that fracking has been good for the economy, and you've heard the statements from Joe Biden, long term, Joe Biden doesn't sound like a supporter of those industries. So why shouldn't those folks think, you know what, Donald Trump's going to be more supportive, not Joe Biden? You comfortable with that?
Let's be really clear about something, Chuck. There is only one person in this country who Joe Biden thinks should lose his job, and it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is trying to distort Joe Biden's position on this because he's desperate to be running against anybody but Joe Biden. That's been true from the start of this primary. Look, he, as Joe Biden said on the debate stage, he is not going to end the fossil fuel industry. He's going to end subsidies for the oil industry. He believes that your taxpayer dollars should go to education. Donald Trump believes they should go to Exxon. That is a contrast and a conversation that we're willing to have any day. But look, if you take a step back, Joe Biden has put forward an aggressive climate change plan that has been endorsed by climate groups, but it's also been endorsed by labor because it is also a jobs plan. It is a plan that will make significant investment in carbon capture and sequestration, in infrastructure. It's a jobs plan. And so, he believes that we are not only going to create new jobs, we're going to maintain jobs. People are not going to lose jobs under a Biden administration.
Before I let you go, one state on election night that
So, yeah, I think I pretty much pre-criticized the two clips on fracking and climate change and transitioning out of oil from AOC and Kate Bedingfield before I showed them. The one other point I wanted to make is they both talk about, and Biden's talked about, getting rid of the subsidies for oil. And I think that's a good idea, because then oil becomes more expensive for the producers, and the costs, or the market gets to decide whether oil is a more expensive energy source than wind or solar or whatever. But the one thing that I wish they had brought up, and the two words that were never mentioned in any of the coverage, including those last two interviews, the two words are carbon tax. It's not only get rid of the subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, but you also have to add on a carbon tax, because, I'm sure a lot of you know what externalities are, but I'll explain it for the few who may not know that when you buy gasoline, the people who produce it are selling you this energy, but they not included in the price is the external cost to all of us of the greenhouse gases, the pollution it creates. They don't have to pay for it in their cost of production. You don't have to pay for it when you buy it. But if you add on a carbon tax, that raises the price of fossil fuel energy, so that solar and wind and all sorts of renewable sources can compete better with the real cost of fossil fuels. The carbon tax adds in the cost of the externalities. That's why I happen to think a carbon tax is a good idea. Maybe that will eventually come up in the Biden administration that we're all hoping for. And anyway, that's the one extra commentary I wanted to put on there. And then the last news clip I'm going to show you, this is the Nate Silver clip that I told you earlier is going to preview what election night is going to be like. This is ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos often has Nate Silver on to give an analysis of a question. This is what should we look for on election night. This is basically what I was saying earlier, the Sun Belt versus the Midwest. If we're going to see a Biden landslide, we're going to see it in the Sun Belt early. If we have to wait a long time to figure out who won, it's going to be because of the Midwest states that Nate Silver talks about in the final news clip that I'm going to show you and then talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Manage expectations here. Many states will not have a complete count of their vote by election night, and in fact it may take days or even weeks to know who has won. With that said, there are some paths where Joe Biden could be in a very strong position. ABC News has been highlighting 6 key states in our 6 for the Win series. You've got the 3 Sunbelt states, Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, and 3 Midwestern ones, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Apart from nicer weather, those Sunbelt states have something else in common. They're likely to count their votes fairly quickly. In Florida and Arizona, mail ballots must be received by Election Day. In North Carolina, there's a ton of early voting, and it's expected that as much as 80% of the vote there could be announced shortly after polls close. And all 3 of those states are pretty close to being must-wins for Trump. We have a new Choose Your Own Adventure tool at 5:30 that lets you see how the probabilities change in our model depending on who wins key states. Biden is approximately a 99% favorite to win the Electoral College if he wins Florida or North Carolina, and 98% if he wins Arizona. But let's say President Trump wins Florida instead, then the election is much closer to a toss-up. Losing Florida means Biden would have only a 58% chance of winning, and in that case, we could be waiting for results for a long time. That's because if Trump secures the Sun Belt, Biden needs to win all 3 Midwestern states. But Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are slower to count their ballots, and ballots might be accepted after Election Day as long as they're postmarked by November 3rd. So I buy that we're going to know quite a bit on election night. If Biden's narrow polling leads in states like Florida translate into wins for him there, we could even get an election night call. Still, I would advise caution. If it does come down to the Midwest, we could be waiting for a long time.
Our thanks to Nate. The roundtable's ahead.
And so there you go. That's like the quick landslide versus the long wait, the Sun Belt versus the Midwest. And I don't know, what I'm really hoping for is that Biden wins Texas. If Biden wins Texas, that is going to be like the blue wave that's not like the highest crest of the blue wave is Biden winning Texas, and that's when I'm going to just laugh and relax that America has rejected this racist liar-in-chief, this agent of chaos, this divisive force that has done so much to destroy the institutions and norms and the constitutional safeguards, the emoluments clause, the executive power to prosecute, and the non-political separation with the Justice Department. I mean, I could go on and on about how Trump is undermining America's democracy, its constitutional liberal democracy. It's a liberal democracy, a constitutional republic, protection of rights, and all I can say is vote like your rights depend on it. This is my ACLU poster I've had up for the last couple weeks. If you want to know the ACLU position on issues in your area, in California, go to aclunc.org/vote. The rest of the country, aclu.org/vote. You can also figure out how to come up with a voting plan. All I can say is 9 days to defeat Trump. And then who knows how long we'll wait to find out if it worked and find out if he'll leave. And I will keep covering that all the way through January 20th, 2021. I don't know if that will be my last Sunday live stream, but I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday through January 20th, 2021. I appreciate all of you who joined me. I do have 2 bonus Dash and Sandy clips, or as I like to call them, dandy, or some people like to call them dandy clips. The first one is from early this morning. It was still dark outside. I think you can hear Jake Tapper. Wait, there were people saying they were going to drink for the speeded up clip. I was watching Jake Tapper. I think it might be sped up. His cross-examination of Mark Meadows. Still dark outside, like 6 a.m., a little after 6 a.m. this morning, California time. Dash and Sandy waiting at the door to go outside for reasons I can't explain to you at all. But there's a little Dash and Sandy interaction in the first Dash and Sandy clip, 9 seconds long over here.
We'll be wearing a mask today as we have this. Obviously, when you have an exposure, you have to take additional mitigation factors to do that. But the other part of that...
Now, I thought that Dash and Sandy clip was a little bit underwhelming, but you can hear Jake Tapper in the background, so that proves it happened this morning for the Dash and Sandy conspiracy theorists out there. I mean, I didn't actually hold up a copy of today's paper while I recorded the clip, but it's just as good. But this is something I recorded, the second Dash and Sandy clip right before the show started. I decided to feed Sandy so she wouldn't whine so much during the show. And this also documents this thing I've been doing recently when I noticed that the cat Dash likes to eat the dog food. If they're like stray pieces of dog food, Dash the cat eats them. And so now when I feed Sandy, the dog, I take one piece and I give it to Dash. As you can see me document in the final clip, the Dash and Sandy dandy clip to end the show tonight over here. So not only do Dash the cat and Sandy the dog get along, dogs and cats living together, the sign of the apocalypse from Ghostbusters 2, but Dash the cat likes eating dog food. Is that like some sign of, one of the signs of the apocalypse, the 7 seals, or I don't know. I'm not a big, I think I might have read the New Testament one time, so I don't know that much about the end times. You can let me know if we're moving into the end times. I think I saw Pat Robertson said if Trump's reelected, he's going to bring on the end times. So is that an endorsement? I don't know. Anyway, but dogs and cats living together, definitely. I think I've proven that. And now I'm going to finish the show. I appreciate all of you who joined me for the live show. Recorded show viewers, let me know what you think about this live stream. I will be back next Sunday. I did upload the debate clip roundup and then this brief thing I found funny that Martha MacCallum did that I got some bad reaction to. Martha MacCallum being contradicted by the graphics on the screen. People thought it took me like 10 minutes. I thought it was funny. People thought it was petty. Like, why are you criticizing her for being, well, anyway, that's a whole other issue. Anyway, this week, the chances of me having time to do that are almost zero. I have like all ACLU stuff all week that I'm doing. I'm barely going to be done before I come back next Sunday for my live stream. Well, who knows? Maybe I'll find some brief moment where I want to upload something, but until then or until next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.